Because gestural interfaces really are changing the way that we use computers, we think. So old school computing involved, mice, keyboards, right? Some command line interfaces. We're really looking at indirect manipulation of objects here. And now, who needs mice and keyboards when people can just touch objects and move them directly on the screen? So that old school way of computing is really a mediated experience. We become experts as we learn to use tools to express ourselves. The technology's enabled us to do this. And these tools require skill, and they're exact and they're controlled. This new idea of gestural control allows us to experience things in an unmediated way, much like finger painting. It's visceral. It can be considered crude, but it's tangible. It's physical, and it's really satisfying. Technology's advanced so that we don't need the keyboard and the mouse as much. We've surpassed the tools that we created. We don't have the same problems that we did that caused us to create those tools in the first place. This is actually a sketch done on an iPhone and done completely by touch, like finger painting, excuse me. So this unmediated and direct manipulation of our stuff, I think, is the closest we can get to a tangible experience in the digital world. Enter the iPad. So the iPad, what is in it? It's not a mini laptop. I know people have been talking about that. It's a mobile device. It's not something that you sort of unshackle from your desk and you bring outside with you. It's got geolocation. It's got GSM. It's got Wi-Fi, and it's an object. It's a physical object. I think I have one over there. It's a blank slate, and that's done intentionally. It's easy to hold. It's easy to pass and share to other people, and what it does and what it is really takes form based on the interface and the application that you're using it for. And it's meant to be used out in the world. It's, like I said, I think you need two hands to use it, but it's definitely, it's lighter, it's portable, it's meant to be shared. And it breaks down barriers. The social barrier of having a laptop and a keyboard, the technology barrier of having to understand complicated menus. And you can see it out in the world. You see people, trying to use it, they figure out how to use it using their arm. It's a great potential to be used outside and to carry around with you, but it's not quite there yet. It is ostensibly a leisure application, a leisure object. As you can see from the ads that Apple puts out, or the apps that they've been focusing on, that they've put out, it's a device that's used. It's got a large screen. It's meant for sort of rich interactions, things, consuming rich media like reading books, like photos, like video, and also the apps that the consumers are talking about and that the media is talking about they're really designed to use to take cues from the physical world and to do things that are more akin to print. They're more leisurely, they're more relaxed, and they allow for deeper engagement than, say, a laptop, which is really about multitasking, or a phone, which is really about really quick interactions on the go. So some quick sort of guidelines for designing for the iPad. So touchscreen basics, obviously, we're talking about something that it's heavy enough that you need to use two hands. So it's often you need to use it one-handed. Sometimes, I'm left-handed, so I'm fine with that, but if you're right-handed, you have to keep that in mind when you're designing, that sometimes people are going to have to use the other hand because you can't actually, because when you cross over from one hand to another, you actually obscure content. So you have to keep in mind that the target should really be as close to the user and to the hand that they're using as possible so that you're not obscuring content, and that our fingers are much less exact than cursors. And the targets that you design, when you talk about touch targets on an iPad or a touch screen, don't have the behavioral cues that designers put into targets on the web for a cursor. So you can't roll over something and see a mouse over or hover state. So when you design these, they have to look like targets to make that obvious, to make them distinct. And they have to be of a reasonable size. And what's a reasonable size? The finger is about 10 millimeters wide, the finger pad. So you're looking at something about the size of a key on a keyboard. We talk about screen orientation. It's a physical, portable object. It's meant to be. It can be easily shared, and you should take advantage of that. And there are very few cues on the interface itself, so it feels natural to hold it vertically and horizontally, and that was done intentionally. There's only one button. It is a blank slate. And so you can think about how the story you're telling and how the application unfolds when you shift it horizontally, when you shift it vertically, what makes the most sense. If you take a look at the Curious app, a lot of applications are doing things like indexes work well vertically because it's a list that you can scroll with one hand. Then you turn it sideways, and that reveals more content. In this case, I talked about how the interface really breaks the barrier to the content. It makes it easier for people to connect with their content because it's on a much larger screen than an iPhone. So you want to use visual anchors as much as possible as entry points into this content, but you want to avoid using lots of buttons and menus and things like that because wherever possible you want to let the content be your navigation. Things like menus and contextual information are important, actually. As you can see here, in this case, instead of having menus that allow you to select which show to watch, the content itself are the buttons, and the way you navigate is actually through exploring the content. When you have contextual information and menus are necessary, that stuff pops up on top of the screen, so you're not asking people to go to another screen and refresh the whole screen and that type of thing, because you want to keep people there and this is what they're experiencing, to keep that sort of that rich media experience. Excuse me. So workflow. So the iPad, much like an iPhone, doesn't have multitasking, at least not yet. So while you can create these richer applications and these richer experiences, people aren't going to be able to multitask and get back to what they're doing. It's going to shut the application when something else happens. So you need to be prepared for interruption at any time. And users shouldn't lose work or sort of get stuck midway through. And you have to think about where it is that people might be using the iPad. So you take this application, for example. This is an Autodesk Sketch application. It's really complicated to draw something like that. But they thought through the workflow so that within each step, there's immediate feedback and results. It's broken down in a way that takes the medium into account. So connectedness, I talked about the barrier and bringing us closer to our stuff, but there's also the ability to share both over one's shoulder when you sort of just turn it and the whole orientation turns, or across the internet, right? Because it's got GPS, it's got Wi-Fi, it's got GSM. There are huge possibilities for both, sort of sharing with a friend across the table or sharing your location across the internet. And I think these are things that the applications for this are just going to grow exponentially, like we've seen in mobile technology lately. And also that this is it's a device, or the tablets themselves are devices with specific strengths. And whenever we design anything for an iPad or a tablet, we have to think about which features make most sense on that device and what makes most sense on a laptop, what makes most sense on the mobile phone. And sort of we could think about them holistically and create the experience. Don't create it in a vacuum. Basically, you want to create something that works across, that's going to work with in an ecosystem of screens and within a service. So in terms of interaction patterns, it is the wild, wild west out there. So Apple has standards and guidelines for this, and you should use them because the problems that people are having the most with the iPad come from the fact that everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel. So discoverability is a problem, sort of figuring out how an application works, memorability because one application works differently from another, and accidental activation because targets don't look like targets and things behave in ways that people don't expect. So if you look at just the iPad apps themselves, here you use a scrubber to flip pages. Here when you tap something it flips. Here when you swipe it flips. Here when you swipe it scrolls. And so these things, it takes a while for people to learn what's going to work and how it's going to work. Another example, when you tap a photo, I don't know what you might think might happen. It might enlarge the photo, it might link to a more details page, it might flip the image to reveal additional photos, or it might do nothing. Does anybody have a guess of which thing it'll do if you tap a photo? Actually, all of them. And different applications will do different things. So in terms of patterns, I would say, look at best practices out there on the web and in mobile, and look at the way things work in the real world, and use Apple's guidelines so that you're not confusing people and creating more confusion, adding more confusion to it. And that said, there's plenty of room for innovation, and there's plenty of room for creating a differentiated experience, but you don't need to reinvent what a swipe means or what a scroll means and things like that to do that. Because this is just the beginning. And that's it. I'm Jennifer. I'm from Kicker Studio, and thanks very much.